All right. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We are back. This is episode 5 of the Unbossed but Bothered podcast. We are super, super excited to have you all joining us today because today we're going to talk about principles over politics. Welcome to episode 5. For those of you who have been with us on this journey, we are moving and grooving. We are on to 5 episodes. Stay tuned, stay connected because Unbossed but Bothered is taking over. And today we have the distinct, amazing pleasure to be joined by another bossed up woman. We are excited to be joined today by Senator Brittany Timberlake Charles. I'm going to pause because, again, I don't want to give all the things. I always think that people do the best job of introducing themselves, but she is the youngest, that's a big thing, state senator in New Jersey, and she is making a remarkable impact. And I'm glad to have her here. But before we get started, Senator Timberlake, can you just tell those of us who are not familiar with you and the amazing work you're doing in the great state of New Jersey, just a little bit about yourself? And before I do, hey, Quan, you ain't say hello. Let the people know you're here. Everything is all good. Uh-oh. Is Quan having technical? That's all right. We'll keep moving. Senator Timberlake.
Okay. Well, ladies, I'm so proud of you for doing this. This is absolutely wonderful. And we need more spaces that we can tell our stories and have the conversations that we need to have that are very important to our community. And that's where it starts and stops for me is community. So I was asked to run for office because I'm a housing advocate, having co-founded along with Harold Simon the Essex Community Land Trust, which is an affordable housing organization that creates permanent homeownership opportunities and also just preserves community assets in general. And through that success and advocacy work, I was asked to run for office, and I did. And my first stop was the Essex County Commissioner Board. I was the president of that for 3 years before going to the Assembly in walking in the amazing trail that was blazed for me by the late and the great Lieutenant Governor Sheila Y. Oliver. And since then, I ran for Senate, and now I'm a state senator. And all of my legislation focuses on changing the system, rewriting systems to make sure that we're building in fairness and opportunity for everyone, and making sure that we are included in all spaces, whether or not it's infant and maternal mortality rates, attacking those rates because we know Black women are dying at disproportionate rates. We have bill packages that we do around that topic alone. $15 an hour minimum wage. That was one of my bills, as I was a prime sponsor of that. And the independent investigation in the event someone loses their life during interaction with law enforcement or while in custody of law enforcement. That was something that passed a Democratic majority by just one vote and was opposed by the previous Attorney General for New Jersey, not the current. The current is doing an amazing job. Shout out to Matt for standing up against Trump for all of New Jersey. We're very proud of him. But the previous Attorney General was in opposition to that. And that was about a year or so before the unfortunate death of George Floyd. And there seemingly was this awakening where people all of a sudden could hear our cries as Black peoples that had been saying that we were being targeted and oppressed by those who were armed with biases, badges, and a gun. So these are just a few of the bills. I also do a lot in the affordable housing space, restoration to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, which is something that we're advocating for right now this budget season, and so many other pieces of legislation that are just important for all people to be able to be included and have a voice.
Wow. Well, that was an introduction. It sounds like you are causing very good trouble in the state of New Jersey. Looks like Quan is having some technical difficulties. So, like we do as Black women in spaces, we will keep moving forward and we'll keep the conversation going. So, I know in your introduction you talked about you having a passion for Black women in maternal health and wanting to drive the conversation on the tough topics of driving systemic change. So, As we are talking about the Fortitude Collective and being unbossed but bothered, that's basically what we talk about. We want to talk about the things that require systemic change.
Mm-hmm.
So with that, how did you get to want to do all this amazing work? Like, what about your life story, your experiences, like led you to want to be an elected official and want to take up the mantle for issues that are important to Black women and people in general?
Yeah, for sure. It's a great question. It really comes from my roots. My roots are in service. My father is a retired Army 82nd Airborne paratrooper, jump master, sergeant first class. Got to get it all right.
That's right.
And I grew up all over the world, traveling, at different military bases with him. And all over the world, I've seen the same issues time and time again, all over the country. Even I've been in 8 or 9 different public school systems throughout the country. And you see the issues in urban America are not just unique to one particular municipality. It's not just unique to, an Atlanta or a Newark or a Camden. This is something that, really truly has been a systemic design and has happened over the years. So I've always been very curious since being a child about how to solve those things. And then my mother was an educator of the mentally and physically challenged. So she would educate people, whether or not it was with our school or with different church programs, while we were growing up. And one of the most prolific things that really I watched her do that I do believe really shaped my focus is that my mother is a white woman, blonde hair, blue eyes. My father's African American. I am an African American woman. And she protested in Hope Mills, North Carolina. Durham is where my grandmother is from. Hope Mills, North Carolina. She protested the Klan that came to march through Hope Mills. Hope Mills actually sat right next to where we lived, and we would go to Hope Mills Lake and we would play, and it was just always such a nice thing for our family, until my mother opened up the newspaper and saw that the Klan was going to be marching through. And she then opened up the Yellow Pages. For those who are younger than the older millennial here, the Yellow Pages is the big book. You didn't have Google, you had to flip through it to find the number,
Yeah.
And she called different churches and said, hey, listen, I think that we should all show up there. There should be more people in support of love and embracing unity than there are people interested in that hate speech and rhetoric. And I watched them from the podium challenge her for standing there with her Black children. And I watched her respond in kind to them. And it was really probably one of the most badass things I'd ever seen her do. And it really was inspiring. So, I mean, my mother doesn't identify as a community organizer. She's not a community organizer, but in that moment she was, and she did. And that's where I get part of my community organizing spirit from. And having taken a look at housing and understanding how housing directly correlates to the ability to build wealth, and how in our country there has been a concerted effort to keep particular people outside of the opportunity of wealth building, particularly Black and brown people. And that's where you get the redlining from, and all these different things that are even still occurring today, built and baked into different systems, such as, homeowners insurance.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good example of a modern day redlining that exists. If you're purchasing in an urban area, the homeowners insurance is more than if you're purchasing the same house, same build, same year, and all of that. In a suburban area. So there's all these things that still exist within the system that need to be fixed. Mm-hmm. But you know what, ladies? We have done prolific pieces of legislation. We even did one in the state of New Jersey, which was the strongest environmental justice bill renowned throughout the country. The environmentalists will tell you about what we did here in overburdened communities that are being polluted on, and children are dying of asthma. And I'm very proud to have been in partnership with Troy Singleton and John McKean, who was able to get that done. But as we sit here today, it's more than just these systems that have these tweaks that need to be fixed. Mm-hmm. So I find that the fight that I've been doing my entire career, and the training, even from watching my mother do that when, by the way, I was in the 3rd grade. Mm-hmm. I see has led up to a time such as this. And the believers, if you're a believer, if you're a Christian, I love the Lord. You understand a time, amen. A time such as this, where we're watching our nation simply fall apart and be compromised. We're watching Black women get canceled for speaking out. But white men who are saying the most preposterous things in the media are being elevated. So we have our work cut out for us. And I now realize that everything that I've done to this point was just a training ground.
That's right. It was all for such a time as this, right? So I want to go back to your motto, which we borrowed for the title of this podcast, but you have championed principles over politics as your core philosophy. But what does that mean for you in leadership? Like, how does that show up in your everyday work, right? You just laid the groundwork for us, right? There's a lot of uncommon and unthinkable things happening in the environment around you, particularly in that political sphere. So how does principles over politics lead your day-to-day work as an elected official in these times?
In these times, yeah. So, I mean, it starts with fearlessness, right? And by the way, politics without principle is one of Gandhi's 7 deadly social sins. So, focusing on that concept and the movement that Gandhi was doing, which if we understand and we know our history, that was also the movement that inspired Dr. King to have the nonviolent movement. We're talking about system changers. We are talking about, impact chasers, right? So really it has to start with fearlessness. In politics, it is, you could have the cure to cancer. And because someone's friend sits on the board of the No Cure for Cancer organization, there will be a fight to try to hold that back. Now, I'm using that as an analogy. I'm not telling you I have a cure for cancer. I'm not, stay with me, people. I'm not, that is simply an analogy. But what I'm saying is that in politics, that's the truth. That's the ugly side of it. And that's the side that I refuse to participate in. So when I say principles over politics, that means saying in a situation, standing up and saying, absolutely not, that's wrong. A real example is like when I mentioned the highest law enforcement official in the state of New Jersey came across the street to oppose that independent investigation bill, which was unprecedented. They don't usually come out of the ivory tower to come to a committee meeting to say what they agree or disagree with. Those conversations usually happen in the background, but that's how strong the opposition was. Prosecutors were calling around. And, as a Black woman, I was having thoughts about, okay, I'm driving home on this turnpike, and talking to my husband and making sure that he understands, what's happening and what I'm doing and how we're moving. But that's putting principles over politics. All the politics was pointing toward, don't do this bill. Because that's the reason why it only passed a Democratic majority by 1 vote. But the principle of the matter was right. And being able to be fearless while also being respectful and arguing the point and staying on the bill, we were able to get that passed and get it to the governor's desk. And then ultimately, after more advocacy, get it signed into law. And the night that they called and said, we're going to be doing this, I broadcasted from my son's nursery. And announced to all the mommies out there that maybe this would be a law that could potentially save our son's lives, because my son is going to grow up to be as big and beautiful and Black as his daddy and his granddaddy. And at some point in time, they go from, oh, he's so cute, to people who have biases looking at them as if, they're a threat. So, and that's how we actually got that 1 vote. It actually came from an ally. And at the time, he was the only Orthodox Jewish male in the caucus. And I told him, I said, listen, this could help save my son's life one day. And he voted for it. And that's how we got it passed. So that's principles over politics. It's not about taking a look at yourself, seeing how you can make money off of this, trying to stay. Like, I have to put a pause on that, right? Because a lot of elected officials, they're more interested in staying than doing the right thing. Like, shout out to Liz Cheney. Republican woman who knew that what she was watching, the coup d'etat, the attempted coup d'etat on the state capitol, January 6th, she knew that was wrong. And regardless of what her constituency was saying, that they wanted her to be in support of Trump, she knew that the country was moving in the wrong direction and was moving outside of the hands of democracy. And she stood up for it and in turn sacrificed her seat. That's principles over politics.
Right. Yeah. That's good. You said something I thought was powerful. You said you need to be fearless but respectful. As the youngest New York State senator, I'm sure you face some challenges with breaking barriers and getting your seat at that table. So tell us about that. What challenges have you confronted and overcome being the youngest in that space and a woman and a woman of color?
Yeah, totally. So when I first came into politics, I didn't share my age because people will associate what their stereotypes are about a person's age. Maybe I could have been the same age as one of their children who wasn't performing as highly as they would like. And they're thinking, well, what does she know? She's the same age as my son or daughter, So for a while, I tried my best to conceal it, but I realized in the digital age, there was no concealing. And then I just leaned into it. I mean, listen, time passes. We all hope to be able to age. So it's also not one of those things that I've been obnoxious about. I'm the youngest. That don't mean anything if you're not doing anything. So, I'm very proud, though, also to be there in the New Jersey State Senate and to work with my colleagues and bring a different perspective, a different energy. And, I have a lot of fun and I learn. I love wisdom, too. What's also obnoxious sometimes about my generation or those who are younger than me is like some people bring to the table this notion of, well, they need to move out the way. Now it's my turn. It's like, but you don't know anything yet. Did you go and sit and listen to this person? Did you learn from this person? So I believe in mentorship. I have had some of the greatest mentors in every space. In housing, and with the Community Land Trust, from John Davis, who's the godfather of Community Land Trust, to Harold Simon, the former publisher of Shelter Force magazine and co-founder of the Land Trust, to politics. I mean, Sheila Oliver, she is and was the highest Black female elected official statewide and the first to win statewide public office, and was also the first female and Black female Speaker of the Assembly. So to have that type of mentorship is amazing. So while we can bask in our youth, we really need to also, nod to those who come before us and listen, get our notepad out, take some notes, because they're dropping pearls. I'm not going to step on them. I'm going to pick them up and invest a few.
Dropping pearls. That was a good one.
I picked that one up.
Yeah, we talk about mentorship and building our own board of trustees and people that we can go to and talk to about professional advice and personal navigating things. So yes, having mentorship and having a collection of people who are truly your allies and truly your sisters is very important to us in the Fortitude Collective. I know Kwan was having some technical difficulties. I think she's fully back with us now, so I don't want to take up all the mic from her, but I was allowing her some freedom to get her technology on board. But
hey, Senator, welcome back.
Yes.
Thank you. You ladies.
Go ahead, Kwan.
No, go ahead.
I was saying you touched on a little bit about your work in the housing space and the community wealth preservation program and how that ties to generational wealth and its impact on people of color or lack thereof. So can you, for those of us who are not familiar with the preservation program, can you tell us a little bit about it and why that was an important initiative for you to spearhead?
Oh, for sure. So New Jersey is constantly competing to be within the top 3, having the highest foreclosures in the nation.
Ooh.
New Jersey also has the widest racial wealth gap in the country. As mentioned before, there's a direct correlation between ownership and housing with wealth building. If you take a look at the foreclosure data, you will see that driving New Jersey to be competing to constantly be in the top 3 consistently for about over 10 years. It's coming out of the urban sectors, the Black and brown sectors. Now, nationwide, poverty doesn't have a color. But in New Jersey, it does have a majority color, and the majority color is Black and brown.
Wow.
Okay. And the areas that are having the highest foreclosures are coming out of our Black and brown communities. So if you purchase a house, Miss Smith, and you work your fingers to the bone, you're keeping this house, you're raising your family in it, but then one day, let's say your kids grow up, but one day you're falling on hard times. Maybe you're a little embarrassed. You don't want to share that you're in foreclosure or at risk of foreclosure. And now all of a sudden it hits the public docket that your home is going to be sold on whatever day. The only way that you would be able to save your home is to have, this is prior to my bill passing, is to have come up with all the money owed or whatever it is that you owed on the back end. And that was that. If you went down to the foreclosure sale to purchase a house at foreclosure, you would need 20% cash or money order and the rest of the money due within 30 days with interest building on the 11th day. Wow. So what is 20% of $100,000? That's $20,000 right there.
Right.
So now if you what is it if it's $400,000 that's owed? So who has this access to this capital? Who has access to people who have access to people who have access to that type of capital? Historically, it is not coming out of our communities, unfortunately, right? So what we did is we rewrote the entire foreclosure system and we built in equity. The wealth program, in that same scenario, Ms. Smith, you in that house, your children are grown. Mommy, why didn't you tell us our family home was in foreclosure? We wanted to, this is our home. We want to save. This is our wealth. This is our inheritance. Well, you're in that scenario, your child could go down to that foreclosure sale and with just 3.5% down and the rest of the money due within 90 business days, which builds in room for financing. And they're using a pre-approval letter that they've gotten from a mortgage lender. So you don't have to have access to deep pockets of cash. You can just finance it. They're able to purchase and to save the family wealth. So it's you who could use it. In this scenario, it'd be your next of kin. If no one was in position to be able to get a mortgage, you could tap a community development corporation to come and buy it for you and rework the mortgage for you. And then if no one wants to take advantage of it, then a community development corporation, aside from the homeowner, could also purchase it to create affordable housing. And there's a requirement for affordable housing. Right now, we have fake nonprofits that decided to pop up and try to abuse the law, but they're getting ready to get caught by the attorney general.
Yes.
They don't know anything about affordable housing.
Yes.
If those nonprofits are listening, I'm telling you now, you're going to get caught. I wrote a whole manual explaining how this works for people. And there's warnings all throughout the manual. But you know how some people do. They try to skirt the system.
Yep.
The last group that can use the community wealth preservation bill is that person who sees a house, it's maybe vacant and abandoned, and they want to buy it, and they are committed to living in the neighborhood. So this is not for flippers.
Right.
The flippers, do what you do, God bless you. But now there's equity built in for people who want to have a stake in the neighborhood, for people who want to reside there, from people who need affordable housing, or for people who want to save their wealth.
Wow. So I'm located in Baltimore, right? So we have a history of redlining. I'm originally from upstate New York, but I live and work in Baltimore. So what you just laid out is like my mind is blown. I'm like, I want to go after we get off of this and understand it, because there's so much connection between ownership and wealth, and that disconnect. I think you said that poverty looks the same across the country. It does. And I think that drawing those connections and linking and making the path clear to the retention and the accumulation of wealth for people is very important. As we look at what's happening on the news every day, there appears to be some intentional attack on people attempting to, acquire the American dream, have gainful employment, and do the right thing. So as a politician, right? Politics are often filled with compromise and competing interests. How do you stay grounded in your principles or in the doing the right thing when you're faced with all these other options and other competing interests? How do you stay grounded in your principles as you're trying to navigate and lead in your state?
Yeah, I think it's always knowing who you are, how you got here, and where you come from, right? Like my grandmother, I'm the granddaughter of sharecroppers, and her father was born within years of the emancipation. Like, understanding the history and understanding my why. Again, I'm a community advocate that got asked to run for office, so I've never considered myself a politician. And that term has had such negative connotation that, is associated with it. Because unfortunately, people have abused and misused the trust of the public. They get into these positions and they're doing, bad magic tricks, acting like they're doing things for people, but really it's something else that's going on. And people are tired of that. All they want is an authentic elected official, So I stay grounded. My family is very important to me. And kids will humble you anytime. I could be making a speech and my little boy will come up to me needing a diaper change, Kids will humble you, So just remembering where you come from, remembering why. And unfortunately, some people who run for office, their whys because they wanted to see their name in lights. Their why could be narcissism. Their why could be a whole lot of to make money, to do this, to do that. Access and power, and like my why has always been very consistent, and that's the sun in which I orbit, right? Like it's to help people, it's to make my ancestors proud, it's to make my family proud, it's to never be known as someone who was a sellout, who had the opportunity to rewrite a law that was oppressive to people that look like me, and not have taken that opportunity because of fear or because of wanting to stay. I just, so that's really what it is. You gotta know your why and stay grounded in that. There's an old saying, don't believe your own press. Like you never take yourself too serious. And, people think so highly like, well, I'm such and such, it's like, listen, titles don't always mean anything. I know people who are called senator and they're not necessarily good people. And I know people who are called senator and they're really great people, right? It's what you do with it that matters. So all of that, that's what I'd say to that question.
I like that.
And to jump in, I think this is a good segue into your platform around women's right and maternal health advocacy. As a woman, we have so many things that's thrown at us, and Black maternity health disparity remains a crisis. You've introduced the legislations like S1097 and S1087. Why are those bills so urgent, and why now?
Yeah. So first, I was sworn into office in the assembly when I was 9 months pregnant. And I since birthed 2 other times, so a total of 3 within at the time within 4 years. But now I've been in the legislature for a total of 6, right? So
congratulations. That sounds like that deserves a pause and acknowledgement right there.
Exactly.
That sounds like a lot. So go ahead, sis.
Thank you, ladies. Yeah, and we're a blended family too. So there's also an older brother as well. He is 18. We're very proud of him. So it's a household with 4 boys under the roof, and it's always a wild time.
You are really a queen all day long, right?
Is it? Am I a queen or am I a maid servant? I don't know. I'm like, what's going on? There's a lot happening here. Okay, keep me in prayer.
Yes.
So no, I'm just joking. Of course, it's the greatest thing that ever happened to me and the greatest blessing, really, truly. Especially because I didn't know that I could have children because of something called polycystic ovarian syndrome, which is something that I was diagnosed with quite a while ago. And there are all of these different symptoms and things or syndromes that we have as women and in our healthcare, and it doesn't get as much attention as it should. And also access to information and to care is not always readily available. So we have a bill right now requiring that if a woman walks into a doctor's office or a midwifery, that they have to tell her all of her available options on how she could birth based off of her health, if she's healthy enough to birth how she desires, and what her insurance will pay for. Because I'm a holistic birther. That's for me. But as a feminist, I believe very deeply that a woman's right to choose should not just be used in terms of whether or not she wants to keep a child. It should be used in every aspect of her life. That's true feminism. Who she wants to love, how much money she wants to make, does she want to work or not, where she wants to live, like all of these, how she wants to wear her hair, like all these things, a woman has a right to choose. That's true feminism in its essence. And that includes how a woman wants to birth. So we have a bill to make to require insurance companies to pay for home birthing if a woman would like to do that. I just told you about the information and access bill, because a lot of people think that, oh, well, I'm going to just go in, they're going to hit me with a epidural, Pitocin, and then a lot of times those types of things end up with a C-section. And by the way, shout out to all the ladies who maybe schedule a C-section and you're not with this hippie holistic stuff. I'm in support of you too. I just want to make sure that everybody has access to all the information, and that's what it's about. We also have a bill that is very dear to me, and there's something called a mommy baby friendly designation that hospitals can get. And I traveled 45 minutes away from my house to birth my children in the setting, in a safe setting that I wanted to, and one of the best hospitals in the state of New Jersey. But I was only able to do that because, one, I researched. Two, so I had access to the internet, right? I understood the language, right? I had a car and a vehicle that allowed me to do that. So there's a lot of these privileges, and I would like to build in all those privileges for every single woman, regardless of what neighborhood they're in, because not every hospital is equal in terms of healthcare when it comes to maternity wards and maternity centers. But there's a mommy baby friendly designation that exists that trains the maternity ward and how to be the best. And we see a higher survival rate, particularly of Black women, in hospitals that are mommy baby friendly certified. So this bill requires that every hospital have to have that level of care, because not everyone has that privilege to drive 45 minutes. And quite frankly, I shouldn't have had to have done that. I shouldn't have had to leave my community to go and get top-notch care. So we want to bring that care to every woman in every community.
And speaking of care, what would you say? Like, how can Black women especially be better advocates for themselves with the high, mortality in childbirth? It seems like, there's an opportunity there as well. So what would you say as far as us being better advocates for ourselves? I think of the lady that just passed that had the, I can't think of her name, but she had fibroids, and, she started speaking out, and you're starting to hear a lot, about, things as such, but it's just the advocacy there. It's almost dismissed for women of color sometimes.
Yeah. I think there's a lot there. I think that we usually don't have a problem as Black women speaking up. So when I hear people give that advice, we don't, right? Like when I hear people give that advice, we'll speak up, we'll say something. Like we usually do. It's whether or not the provider is taking us serious. It's whether or not our voice is being heard, or we're not getting hit with the stereotype of, oh, she's so strong, right? So like there's a doctor in New York who had wrote a book, and she talks about post-traumatic slave disorder. And I'm not telling you I believe in this, but I'm telling you that if post-traumatic slave disorder exists, if you do subscribe to that, you can't have an up without a down, the post-traumatic master order must exist too. And when it comes to something like that, where would you see it? You would see it in how we were bred like cattle. And those who owned us as cattle and didn't see us as humans were like, well, so, she's strong. Well, Mary's strong. She's going to have all these kids and she's fine and she's got it. And you kind of see that similar mentality that runs through the medical community when it comes to Black women. And I really do believe that that's an issue. And I also think the issue is the stereotypes that just exist about Black people. So educating the providers is key. And that's part of what the Information and Access Bill is. But then also educating our community is key too. And making sure that we're letting ladies know, like, listen, if this is asked of you or if you're not being taken serious, you can switch. You're the boss. You are hiring them. You can switch providers. This is how you do it. Or here's the information on where you can go to for help. Or this is a hospital that actually hears you and is mommy baby friendly. So it is about that. But we have so many obstacles that we have to deal with as Black women, and this is just unfortunately one of them.
It's almost like we have to own our health care like we own our careers. We really need to be that intentional. One of our other co-founders that didn't join today, we were talking about something and she was like, I did the work. I went out, I researched, I found, providers, all Black providers. And that really resonated with me because I'm like, have I done the work, in that specific place? I'll do the work all day and get the certifications that I need for my career, but have I done the work when it comes to my healthcare? And, I can't honestly say that. So we need to start, that I think that's a message for us Black women. We need to own our healthcare policies for ourselves, like we own our careers.
Totally. We've got to, ladies. And then we also have to inform ourselves. And there's a big push in New Jersey and also, the Black Breastfeeding Week. I'm very big into that as well, the holistic feeding. And how many generations of our young women were just given a can of WIC milk for the baby. And no one took the time to send that young woman a lactation consultant. There's all of these things and education that has to be done. And to the point where that type of behavior was normalized. And by the way, a fed baby is a healthy baby. So if you're not breastfeeding or if you're not able to breastfeed or it's not your thing, I do not judge at all. But I do like to inform about the benefits of breastfeeding if you can. And a lot of times women may not go as long as they could have gone or even try to go past just the first interaction because they haven't gotten taught by the lactation consultant. So we have a bill that requires before a woman is discharged to actually have 2 visits from a lactation consultant. We see the benefits of breastfeeding from higher IQ, lower levels of obesity, higher immune system, like less risk for breast cancer for the mother, as well as helping her to contract and put her organs back in place. Like there are so many benefits of it, but a lot of times in our community, we haven't necessarily been taught those things. So again, back to our history, we were nursing master's babies and doing all these things, right? And then when we have our freedom, all of a sudden we're getting, government formula pushed on us, and it really changed the whole trajectory of what it is that we do and believe as far as nutrition.
Wow. So we've talked about a lot. We've talked about you confronting the housing issue and crisis and building wealth through home ownership and Black maternal health. Our organization, the 42 Collective, we use a quote from Shirley Chisholm to kind of as the impetus of why we formed and how we got this whole collective started. So our soror, Shirley Chisholm, has famously said, if they don't give you a seat at the table, bring a folding chair. So it sounds like you've been bringing your folding chair to a lot of spaces. So I would love to hear, what does that quote mean to you in this season of your life?
Yeah, Shirley Chisholm was What a pioneer. And I also think of, when I think of Shirley Chisholm, I also again think of Sheila Oliver, because Sheila really, really was inspired by Shirley Chisholm and taught other young women to bring that folding chair. And by the way, sometimes you bring that folding chair to sit, and sometimes you bring it to wield. You know, you have to know.
That's right.
You have to know what time it is and how to use the folding chair, you know. And of course, we're talking theoretically.
Yes.
The literal people out there who are like, what did she just say? You know, what it means, again, it really comes back to fearlessness. Don't worry about what people think about you. Be you. Don't worry about, you know, oh, are they going to let me stay? If it's the right thing, trust me, it will be okay. You know, I'm going to put a period at the end of the sentence on that. When I told you about the Attorney General opposing that bill, you know, after the death of George Floyd, he called and apologized. Now, imagine if that was something that we let up on.
Yeah.
Or because I was scared, or because of all this political opposition coming from within even my own party, just, you know, to have quit on, we wouldn't have that piece of legislation. And it has been prolific and life-changing. So if you stand on the right side of history. So I think that's the folding chair for me, you know.
I love that. So what do you say to our listeners, right, who happen to be women of all ages and of all backgrounds, but what advice would you give to women who are listening to us, or to our male followers
Shout out
that
to
are
the
stepping into leadership and are stepping into political spaces in this current climate, right? I think what we've seen over the last 30 days, I don't think any of us could have predicted it would go like this, right? But knowing what we know, right, knowing what we have experienced throughout history, for those listeners who are about to engage in some good trouble, who are about to take on leadership roles, who are about to step into new roles because they lost their federal job, like, what piece of advice would you give to people who are about to start causing some good trouble in their spaces in leadership or in political spaces?
Yeah, that's a great question. First, I know that there's a listener. I call her my mom T. That's a mom and auntie combined. Sandra Sharp-Ponte, longtime educator in the Newark public school system, who's taught me so much. Listen, I'm no longer saying that we're living in perilous times. You know, people keep saying that, perilous times. We've been hearing that since the pandemic, right? Like, we're living in disgusting times. What we're watching coming out of Washington is unthinkable for our nation. And in fact, those who were serving in office just 10 to 15 years ago, some of whom have gone on to glory, are probably rolling in their grave, because this is not what America is about. This is not, never mind Democrat and Republican, this is not what American is about. America is about freedom and opportunity for all. So we have people who have been laid off on the federal level and laid off by a billionaire who we know is a big supporter of AI. And I truly do believe that part of the motivation is to implement AI in those spaces where the humans no longer are there. Now, you know, maybe a few years ago, you hear someone say that and you're thinking, no way. But now you hear someone say that and you're like, I can see it. The port workers in our nation had just come off a strike in the summertime. And their main fight was to fight against automation, because their jobs are going to be replaced with robots. And Elon Musk, Tesla, they have their robot, Optimus, I think its name is.
Yep.
And it actually says on the caption of that robot, if your job is boring or dangerous, this robot can do it. Well, how many people can describe their job as boring?
Right.
You know? So I think that what we're watching is a takeover. I think that they're using, they open the door with a little bit of truth and they dangle it in your face. Like, oh, government needs to be more efficient. I think maybe we could all agree to that, right? But then the way in which they're going about it, it's not about efficiency. It's about them, and it's about money, and it's about contracts. And it's unfortunate what we're watching. So what I would say is people need to wake up. there was a large segment of the population that didn't vote. And now the population is saying, well, who's the next person that's going to lead us? We need a Dr. King. Well, the sister just ran and y'all didn't vote for her. Like, we told you that this man was speaking rhetoric like a dictator.
Mm-hmm.
This man has on his resume that he's an abuser of women, of rape, inappropriate touching, all of these things. And he's sitting in the Oval Office and then promotes other people who have that same background on their resume. So when we're talking about women's rights and what it is that we're doing, how can we think that on our national level we're going to receive any support or protection in that area when we have our own defense secretary who, if you were watching those confirmations and the things that were coming out, were just brutal as it relates to women. And then you have the layers of racism and isms that exist within it all. So these are disgusting times. People need to wake up. Stop spreading misinformation. Get on the internet, find a solid source, research it, and get out and vote. Unfortunately, some of the people who are losing their jobs, not all of them, of course not all of them, were supporters of this administration. But, you know, we're seeing exactly all of his campaign promises he's actually doing.
Yeah, he told us.
He told us. Mm-hmm. And then people like me, you know, I was stumping for Kamala. We try to tell everyone, particularly Black women. Mm-hmm. I love the headline whenever Joe Biden had won the first time, and it had said something like Black women, the women who decided to save the nation, or something like that. It was on one of the headlines of one of the top newspapers, because we come out in numbers, record-breaking numbers, and we voted because we knew that this guy in office now is terrible for our people. But unfortunately, he's in there now.
Absolutely. And we got some questions in the chat, but before I go to that, because I want to stay on that, you used the word disgusting, and that resonates with me on, you know, some of the things that we're seeing, particularly targeted at Black women. I mean, we saw, you know, how Kamala was, you know, treated during that election, but it also was an awakening for many Black women who have secretly faced this behind closed doors, whether in corporate spaces, in their workspaces, in government, or whatever. And it was like we watched this play out, you know, on the scene. Now we have, you know, a lot of firing and attacks. And, you know, there was just something recently where I want to say Elon Musk said something about ignorant women on The View or something like that. So there's this attack. I mean, there's this personal attack that's happening specifically for Black women. What advice would you give, you know, Black women or women in general on, you know, how to show up and be advocates for each other in this space? I mean, they've played on our divide for a long time, but now there's more, there's a calling for us right now to be a lot more. And we use it, you know, our brand is all about collective and, you know, taking up space. And, you know, I always say, you know, our competitive advantage at this point, at this moment of time, is for us not to be the only one in the room, for us to bring each other along. So what advice would you give around that sentiment?
For sure. And that's a beautiful sentiment. You know, there's strength in numbers. We need to stick together. I don't want to see any or hear any of these divisions. I don't want to hear about light skin, dark skin. I don't want to hear about, because then the thing with Kamala that Donald Trump started and saying that she wasn't Black, and, you know, and then some Black people's buying into that nonsense. Well, what is it? Bob Marley was also mixed. And we love Bob. Shout out to Bob. Bring the revolution. Okay. So, like, you know, Barack Obama, you know, but we literally let these people play in our face and tell us and paint the narrative about us and what we ought to be. And we've got to stop that. We need to get together. And by the way, other minority groups too. I was very shocked at some of the numbers of other minority groups. And we know the history. We're in Black History Month. So we know the history as Black peoples, that there isn't a right that has been won that any immigrant has that didn't come from our history in the civil rights movement, that didn't come from our marches being sprayed with fire hoses, beaten in the head, dogs sicked on us. Okay, so whether or not a person came to this country and is able to buy a house, is able to have a job, is able to go to a good school, it is because of the African Americans who fought hard for that. And then sometimes when the African American says, hey, listen, we need this, we need somebody in support, sometimes the minority groups will not associate necessarily with African American. That too is also a division. We as minorities throughout this country, whether or not it's Asian, Latino, Black, however you describe, we have more in common than we do not. And this is just ridiculous that somebody of this stature has now become a president of the United States because they were able to divide us. They were able to rank us in totem pole type of style. Well, this one is better than that one, and that one is better than this one. And quite frankly, sometimes we fall for that hook, line, and sink 'em. And we've got to stop that. I'm telling you, Black people wake up, minority groups wake up, get together. You know, I learned and I was taught very early in my household that we all bleed red. We're all human beings, you know? So we really need to band together and get out the vote, but also vote for people who are willing to change the system, people who are fearless, people who aren't afraid, people who would sacrifice themselves for the greater good, like a Liz Cheney.
Yep. So, she's a good troublemaker. I think.
Yeah. And shout out to our allies, because the civil rights movement wasn't one with just Black people alone.
That's correct. Yeah. And we talk a lot about here in the 42 Collective, just the power of community, the power of connecting with other like-minded people who have the same agenda, the same passion, that we can hold each other accountable, that we can go to war together. And if we got to catch an L or two, that we'll be there to lick each other's wounds, right? I think that in this day and age, we are better, we are stronger together. And that's something that we are building in the 42 Collective. And even these type of conversations of finding other like-minded women in their spaces across the country that are doing the work to making sure that we are on the right side of history, that, you know, when we are old and sitting on our rocking chair, that we can look back and think that we did the work, that we took the risk, that we were fearless, that we had a voice and that we used it. So super excited. Just know that there are so many of us across the world in all these different corners. And we hope through this podcast and through the 42 Collective and our upcoming conference that we can continue to invite women into these spaces so that we can lift each other up, that we can share resources, that we can hold each other accountable, that we can get ready for war. Because as you said, there's disgusting things happening in the world, and it'll be us here together, locked arm in arm, trying to change that narrative. I think, Quan, did you have another question? I'm looking at our time to make sure we don't run too much over.
There is a question in here that said, how can people get involved if they feel they don't know anything about politics?
Oh, that's a great question. So most people who feel they don't know anything about politics, you actually do, because politics is all around you, right? So it's even the politics on the job. The politics of if you're working at McDonald's and you start in their entry level and now you want to be a crew trainer, but they chose the other person next to you. That's politics. Okay. It is all around us. I think that understanding and knowing what your local elected officials are doing. There's a saying that says all politics are local. So find out who your council person is, who your mayor is, who your state reps are, your assembly people and your senators. And then you go to the federal, the Congress and the Senate, right? And your county representatives too. And then understanding what it is that they do. Okay. Don't just believe what is coming out of their mouth. I'm telling you that.
Yes.
Look them up.
Look them up.
Look how they vote. Look how they vote. Is their voting record, if they're an incumbent, is their voting record in line with your beliefs? What are your beliefs?
Yeah.
Right? and choosing a person who is more closely aligned with that. The definition of politics is deciding who gets what, where, when, why, and how. The late and great Dr. Kwame Akinor taught me that at Seton Hall, and I always loved that definition. But that's the reason why we need a seat at the table, and that's also the reason why a lot of times our community isn't getting what we need.
Yeah. You said that's why we need a seat at the table. So just to tie something into what's happening in the news and what's happening around us as we prepare for our close. Yesterday, we had a very, I think, profound Black voice, that of Joy Reid in her sudden departure from MSNBC. And by some of our listeners, it may feel like the Black women's voice in media is being devalued and quieted again. One, how do you think that connects to just the broader issues of trying to silence those voices that need to be heard? But then also a piece of encouragement for those, right? Because I think that, if we just only consume the noise, right, it would be easy to be discouraged in this space. But I think, from my perspective, there's power in our collective. So I'm not that worried. We just got to wield it. But I would like to hear from you about, how do we combat that feeling of hopelessness, right? Because we are seeing rights that were fundamental to who we are as Americans being silenced or pushed aside or just disregarded. We're seeing Black voices that we think are powerful to making sure we have information that are credible sources silenced. So what words of encouragement do you have for our listeners, as we think about what's next, what's coming, what to anticipate over the next coming weeks and months?
Yeah, I mean, the encouragement that I have is don't be silenced. I hope to see Joy come out with a podcast. I think that we have all of these different mediums that, quite frankly, those who are now in elected office and their oligarchy friend over here, these social media platforms that even they've created.
Yep.
I think that we have an opportunity to still not be silenced. And I think it's a crying shame what has happened. And I also do think it's a breach on free speech in journalism. But again, it's important to know our history because we've seen this before in the Third Reich, in Germany, Hitler's regime. So, attacking the press and trying to silence them, but only keeping certain press that are pushing a certain propaganda. So again, it's about being aware. So don't feel hopeless. Don't feel hopeless at all because, my faith, Jesus Christ gives me hope. That's something that grounds me. You have to find what it is that grounds you, and lock in on that. And remember to be fearless because we're experiencing turbulence on this airplane. It's this turbulence. It's a
good way to say it. Turbulence on this airplane.
On oxygen mask has dropped down. I'm telling you, put your own oxygen mask on first, and then get busy helping the other people around you. So, it's not easy. And even as I give this piece of advice, I'm also listening to it too because we all need it because we're human. We're working on codifying some of those rights, those natural rights that we've come to. Those things that we've come to believe are natural rights that are actually only standing on case law. In New Jersey, we actually codified Roe v. Wade a few years ago. Yep. And that's the reason why we're not having the issues that some of the other states are having with a woman's right to reproductive freedom and to choose. So, everybody can do something too. No, you don't have to be an elected official.
Yes.
Everybody can do something. Be a big voice.
I love it.
So there it is. You all heard it. We got some great takeaways. We got some homework to do. We have some action to make sure that we continue to carry forward. Senator Timberlake, how do all of our guests, as well as others, everyone, because we want to continue to hear your voice. We want to continue to hear what you have going on in New Jersey. You have initiatives that I'm sure could be scalable in other areas. So how do we stay plugged into you and make sure that, we are doing whatever we need to do to keep to hear your voice as well as, stay connected?
Yeah, it's a great question. So you can follow me on social media, NJ Sen Timberlake. Facebook, Send Timberlake, but you can also just go to my other Facebook platforms and Instagram, which is just Brittany Timberlake. Just spell Brittany right. You see, I do it different. Remember, the name is Britney Spears and Justin Timberlake. If they would have gotten married, all the older millennials know what I'm talking about. Okay.
I like that. I like that.
So hit me up on Instagram. And reach out to my office. If you're in New Jersey and you need some help, 973-395-1166. And we'll be there to help you best as we, the best that we can.
Well, we love that. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to all of our listeners. We hope you are tuning in to us also on social at the Fortitude Collective, that you're getting hyped and excited about joining us in Atlanta in a little over 30 days for our third in-person conference, Unbossed but Bothered 2025. We're bringing it back to Hotel Coley in Atlanta, Georgia, last weekend of March. Get your tickets. Our lineup is crazy, amazing. We're going to have a good time. Thank you for listening, and we will see you on the next episode. Have a good evening.
Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.